Yeah, the most difficult thing is finding employment. The unemployment rate for ex-offenders 1 year post-release is 75%. Finding a job is the number one key ingredient to getting someone to successfully re-enter into society.
With us is Michael Swiger from True Freedom Ministries. He's the executive director. And Michael, tell us a little bit about True Freedom Ministries. What is it? What do you guys do?
Yeah, True Freedom is a nonprofit organization. We're headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. We reach out to three major spheres. We do homeless in the city of Cleveland. We do addiction recovery in the inner city of Cleveland. And we do prison ministry all across the state. True Freedom is Ohio's largest prison ministry. We have 10 full-time staff, 150 volunteers. And when we're not locked down because of the COVID-19 crisis, we do over 200 services, classes, and programs every month in the state of Ohio.
How many?
209.
Wow.
Every month.
Wow. Wow. So you support and help homeless, people that have been incarcerated, and drug addicts.
Correct.
How long you've been with True Freedom?
14 years.
14 years. And when did it start, True Freedom?
14 years ago.
14 years ago.
True Freedom grew out of the Gospel House Prison Ministry, which was a local small prison ministry here in Cleveland that had been going on for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
The president of Millennia, Frank Snito, was on the board of that prison ministry, and he was on the board that brought me there to come on staff. And then after we working together there for a number of years, we launched True Freedom, and to do it on a much larger scale.
Got it. So this is the first time that I've worked with an organization such as True Freedom. I've worked in the past, obviously, typical college relations. You work with colleges or high school kids. This was my first time being exposed to, frankly, an organization that is supporting a segment of the population that in most instances is being ignored. And as I come into Millennia, this is, in complete transparency, this is a passion for Frank Snito, our CEO. And he said, hey, I want you to work with True Freedom and see what we can do in terms of employing some of these individuals. And frankly, I was like, oh, okay, what is this? This is different. Never done it. And that's how I met you. And then little by little, we started working together. Prior to starting this recording and calling you, I was watching the video that you have on your webpage, which, by the way, is very well done. And in terms of an overview of what you guys do, I think it hits all the main points. So I took a couple of not pieces of information, but questions that came up from that video. So that you and I started talking primarily about those that have been incarcerated that are now reintroducing themselves to society. So in terms of that group, that segment, what is the biggest challenge those leaving the prison system have when it comes to reintegrating themselves into society?
Yeah, the most difficult thing is finding employment. The unemployment rate for ex-offenders 1 year post-release is 75%. That number was from the last 2 or 3 years when the unemployment rate was almost zero nationwide. So a safe place to live is always essential. Transportation is also essential, but finding a job is the number one key ingredient to getting someone to successfully re-enter into society.
Let's talk a little bit about safe place to live first. What does that mean?
Most of the guys we work with come from very dysfunctional homes, as you can imagine. I think the statistics say that over 80% came from a broken home. There was not two parents in the home. A lot of these guys lived in transient housing, bouncing from shelter to flop house to home. So getting a place that's stable and safe and drug-free is essential. When people come home from prison, they have a lot of stressors and a lot of concerns that most people don't even think about. Taken for granted.
Yeah.
Where a guy coming home, I suspect, when you go to sleep tonight, you're not going to be worried about somebody coming in and shooting you while you're sleeping. Well, a lot of the folks we work with, that's a real fear for them. So having a home where they're not worrying about their own safety and their stability is essential.
Hmm.
So we work with folks before they come home to place them, always preferably with a family member who's been investing in them while they've been gone. But if not, into a stable transitional housing center. We work with several around the state of Ohio.
Now, before I move on to transportation, you work with these individuals while they are in prison. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do in terms of working with them while they are inside.
Yeah, we do. We have two major silos of activities. On the one side, we do spiritually based outreach. We do worship services, Bible studies, discipleship, mentorship, things that you would traditionally think of as prison ministry. But then we also do life skill training and workforce empowerment. So on that side of the equation, we're doing mentorship. We teach computer skills, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. We have installed a computer lab inside the prison system where we train guys in Microsoft software before they get out of prison. We work with guys on trade school training. So people who've gone through culinary arts classes while they've been in prison, guys who've gone through welding, painting, carpentry. We take those guys during their last 90 days of incarceration and we place them in externships with a company that needs that type of skill set. For the employer, it's they're not hiring the guys. It's externship. Like in your world, would be college interns. Come on, they work for free to get real world experience. Same thing, but our guys are coming out of prison. We transport them back and forth to the employer. So what we found, if you can get a guy a job before he gets out of prison and he's able to be confident that he knows he can do the job, the employer's already got a chance to test drive him, so to speak, and he's going to be a reliable employee. That unemployment rate drops down to almost zero.
Oh, wow. So we'll talk about the employer side in just a moment because, that was my main focus on getting you on and talking to you, which is exposing True Freedom Ministries and other organizations that are probably similar to employers and what employers can actually benefit from, but they may be scared of not knowing how to work through this. So they're working with you on the inside. They come out. Safe place to live is a challenge. Then you mentioned transportation. Of course, they're probably coming out. They don't have a car. Now they're relying on public transportation. What happens in that front?
Yeah, and that's one of the things where we saw a huge need in the city of Cleveland, and we stepped in to fill it. The public transportation system in Cleveland is terribly unreliable when it comes to people who work outside of the city itself. You can get to the outer belt suburbs, but it takes multiple bus transfers. Sometimes you have to walk some distances. I'll give you, for instance, there's a shelter we work with on the west side of Cleveland called Laura's Home. It's in the city limits of Cleveland. We have an employer, I won't mention their name, on the east side of Cleveland. And we were trying to place people back and forth. To take public transportation, someone from the west side to the east side would have to transfer 3 buses and walk over a mile between stops to get there. And the commute's over 2.5 hours. So no one is going to do that.
Yeah.
It's not. And then that's under good circumstances. And our people have other challenges they're working with. So we launched an organization called True Freedom Enterprises that provides transportation to and from shelters and the prisons to take people to their work sites.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and then the last one that you said, obviously the biggest challenge is finding employment. How much of the work of finding that employment is done prior to their release?
In the program we're running, we do that exclusively with people we work with. Because what normally happens, if without a program like what we have in place, there's 2 major divides. On the ex-offender side, he has a fear factor. He thinks he's not going to be accepted. He won't even try most cases. He won't engage. A lot of times has low human capital, so he doesn't have much to offer, maybe nothing on his resume or very little manual labor positions. On the employer side, and this is what you and I have talked about a lot over the years, there's a big fear factor when you're bringing ex-offenders. Part of the HR manager's job is to bring on talent while limiting the risk. So when I come with an ex-offender, the first thing is I have a risk that other people don't have.
Correct.
So HR managers are very tentative about that.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, because the numbers are outrageously huge. In Ohio, we have 50,000 people in prison. 21,000 get out every year. 6,000 come back to Cuyahoga County. So if you're an employer and you have no way of vetting out the people that's coming to you, it's easier just to say no because it's safer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But from our side of things, while there's 50,000 people in the system, we work with hundreds. Only a couple dozen will qualify for our work release program that we've been invested in for a couple of years. We oversee them during the transitional process. So we vetted them. The prison systems has vetted them. They've been trained. And then once they get hired, we stay with them for up to 6 months to a year post-release to make sure they've integrated. So we put some guardrails around people that look like they're risky on the surface. What you find out is people who are very high performers who are just grateful for the opportunity.
And I will tell you, I that piece of being grateful is the one that really touched my heart when we started having the conversation after Frank Sinito mentioned to me, hey, connect with Michael and let's see what we can do. Tell me about the role that gratitude plays in the hearts and minds of these individuals.
Most of the people we deal with have never been treated with respect or kindness in their whole lives. We had a gentleman who was 24 years old at Grafton Correctional. He had tattoos from his ears down. He went to prison for selling drugs with his mother. He was getting high and using drugs with her while he was 16 years old. While he was in prison, she dies of an overdose. And he went through our program. And the day he got out, I drove him home from prison, and we stopped to get clothes at our facility. I think you're familiar with what we do. So he's going around with his duffel bag, and this hardened, tattooed ex-offender starts crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "No one's ever been kind to me before."
Wow.
So he was a gentleman that we were able to help place in a job with a company with bath fitters, one of the companies that do the bath fitting. And he was so grateful that they gave him a chance because we sponsored him. He became a very top performer for them. And those people who've been broken, who've never had an opportunity, have a great deal of loyalty for those people who reach out and give a helping hand.
So I think about almost a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, I don't recall his name, but there was a gentleman that came from Columbus who started, he doesn't have an organization like True Freedom, but he does employ people that have been released from prison. And he said they're the best placement that he has ever made because of that loyalty component. So let's talk a little bit then about the employer side, because as you said, you're probably your biggest challenge outside of finding them the housing, the transportation, is finding them that employment. Because on one side, this is the funky part of society. We want those individuals to do better, right? Recover, and re-enter society. But the same society then says to us, but if they do something, I'm going to hold you accountable. Here I am in a predicament as an employer saying, I want to help, but my liability is out there. Tell us a little bit about what you've encountered. What are some of the considerations as you partner with employers that you go through?
Yep. You're absolutely right. Certainly, if an ex-offender does something wrong in the workplace, it's going to be news. Now, unfortunately, wrong things happen in the workplace every day.
Yep.
But when the ex-offender does it, it becomes much more sensationalized. So I sympathize with HR managers' fear of wanting to engage this part. However, there are certainly things that can be done that we're doing to try to limit that fear. So when we come to Millennia or other companies, we try to come with a file that's almost like a dossier, giving all kind of documentation to support an evidential-based programming that there's been some behavior modification. So if we've had guys who had a violent crime, in their file, there's going to be numerous programs on anger management, cage your rage, on problem-solving skills to show that whatever the underlying problem was has been programmed and dealt with over a long period of time. The Department of Corrections also started this on their own, separate from us. It's called a Certificate of Employability. They issue this, and it's very difficult to acquire if you're an ex-offender. You have to complete all of your trade school training, all of your each individual has a recovery plan they have to work through, and they have to have excellent conduct reports and job evaluations over a course of several years. So it's a way for the prison system to be able to come to give a document to an ex-offender that gives, and it has to be approved by his sentencing judge as well.
Okay.
So that the employer gets a chance to say the prison system says he's safe, his sentencing judge says he's safe, and he's completed everything that was asked of him. Therefore, while there's still a risk, it's much more minimal.
Got it. And I guess it's a way for the system to say to the employer in plain English, we're not going to hold you liable or accountable for something that happens, assuming that it's not something that the employer created, by offering that certificate.
Yes.
Now, obviously, True Freedom is here in Ohio, but I know that in conversations that we've had, we've talked about other states. Tell us a little bit about those employers that are listening that are not in Ohio. What is out there? Is this certificate, for example, available in other states from what you know?
In the federal system, it is.
Okay.
Now, if you look in Ohio, and I think almost every state in the country has a federal prison within them. So usually you have both populations that most employers will encounter. There'll be state prisoners and federal prisoners in the same jurisdiction. So the federal system has the certificates of employability. I know we certainly have it in Ohio. Pennsylvania has it as well. Beyond our contiguous states, I'm not sure.
So, we were 45, 60 days ago, economy very high. I am sure that this segment of the population became very popular because now employers are saying, where do we find talent? And they start tapping into the prison or partnering with organizations such as True Freedom. Now here we are, post coronavirus, millions unemployed. It may be a little bit too premature, but what have you heard? What has been the impact to True Freedom, but more importantly, these individuals that you're helping?
Yeah, for us, because of all the governmental restrictions, the prison system is still locked down. So right now, only essential employees are going in. So we're not allowed to go in to do the programming.
Oh,
we're not
wow.
out to do the job placements right now. Each of those prisons are quarantined. We do have a work crew coming out of a transitional housing center we're still working with because the employer is a medical company that's considered essential. So work is now coming out as the governor keeps announcing new phases of the rollout. We're not sure when we're going to have access to our prisoners for the work release program again. So that's still to be determined. What I expect to happen is there's going to be, when the labor market becomes bloated with all these unemployed people, HR managers become a lot more selective, and then people that I work with get marginalized.
Got it.
So that's why one of the things we try to do with this work release program is give the employer a chance to have an employee he doesn't have to pay for a number of months. And this is, so you're an HR manager, you'll appreciate this. So if I come to you and say, okay, Gustavo, if I would give you 6 guys who you don't have to pay, they're not on your workers' comp, they'll be 100% drug-free, they'll get drug tested once a week, and they'll get strip searched every day, they'll have a GPS monitor on, and I'll watch over them, and you can use them however you want for free. Is that interesting to you?
Yes.
Because we knew we had to make it a financial incentive to the employer to give our people a chance, and then give them, once they have the chance, earn their right to be kept. So that's sort of the premise of our program, is we'll come to an employer, give them a free labor pool, and I'll bring them to you. I'm sure you appreciate this, your other HR managers who are listening, is entry-level positions have 2 big problems. They don't show up, and they sometimes have substance abuse problems.
That's right.
So if I can make sure they show up and they're clean when they get there, I've already jumped over 90% of the hurdles.
That's right.
That's what we do. The prison system drug tests everybody in our programs once a week, so we know they're staying clean, and we bring them to you whenever you want. We pick them up and take them back. So if I can do that for you and doesn't cost you anything for 90 days, it gives us a chance to compete with people out in the workforce.
Is that already in place? So you guys do that already?
We do that right now.
What has been the feedback and reaction from employers?
We've had a great success. Just in your realm, We have a crew that works at the Marble Room, a group of ladies who've gone through the Chopping for Change
That's
program.
right.
We've had about 9 graduate in the last 18 months. 8 out of the 9 were hired immediately, and several have been promoted multiple times. So in the food service area, it's been phenomenal. We partner with the American Preservation Builders. We have a paint crew.
Yep.
And now we have 2 paint crews going. So to this point, we have, I think, a 95% retention rate for our people once they get hired upon release. So our retention rate for our candidates is much higher than the general population. It goes back to gratitude and then some desperation because they know if I lose this job, I may not get another chance.
Yeah. So I tell you, I as I've told you many times when we've spoken, I've been fascinated by this. You know, fortunately on my side, I haven't had anybody in my close family. Had a brother who had a drug addiction, was able to overcome it. Unfortunately, passed away last year of medical conditions that he had. But I remember meeting with an individual that you introduced me to that had spent, I think it was 29 years in prison. And I looked at this individual, and I couldn't help but see my brother, right? Mm-hmm. My brother had not been to prison, but he could have been that individual. Yeah. And my brother had a handicap and struggled because of the handicap. I can only imagine him, if he had gone to prison, dealing with a handicap, and then on top of that, dealing with being, you know, having a tainted past that now nobody wants to touch you. So, you know, I'm glad that I was exposed to it because, frankly, I never thought about it. I never thought about the fact that there is this segment of the population that is desperate for opportunities. And, you know, here we are 2 years later after I started with Millennia, you know, talking about what you guys are doing. Tell us a little bit about the type of jobs that tend to be where these individuals are placed.
Yeah. Now, typically, if guys who don't go through our program, they shoot for the lowest possible jobs, landscaping, roofing. That's what you almost exclusively see guys go to. And I always tell the folks, don't sell yourself short. You've been trained while you've been in prison. You've got an education to offer. Shoot for as high as your education level lets you do that. So we try to find and we sift through the guys very carefully to place them at their highest skill level. There are a lot of white-collar guys who are in prison. Ex-lawyers, former accountants, people who already have a pretty good education. And what I tell the folks, you may not be a lawyer again when you get out because your conviction prohibits that, but there's a lot of small businesses who would love to have a lawyer be their general manager because normally they could never afford that kind of talent if they had to pay for a guy who was not disbarred. So I always try to tell the guys, you have skills, you have an education, because you're tainted, you're going to take a lower compensation than you're used to. But once you get started, you can go as high as your talent lets you go. You know, about that very thing. A gentleman that I worked with was, before I went to prison, vice president of Federal Express, the Washington, D.C. office. He graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy. He had his own yacht. And his brother got him hooked up with some Colombians. And once a year, he would sail his yacht to Colombia and bring back 7 tons of cocaine. And they would pay him $2 million to sail back and forth. He did this for a number of years. Wow. Ended up going to prison, got arrested, did federal prison, did state prison. So now he comes out. He had a very high-profile job, had a great education, and now he has this massive conviction. He got a job working for York Furnace as a purchasing agent, just the lowest level purchasing job. Worked his way up. Once he got started, he started getting recruited from other companies.
Oh, wow.
And because he was recruited, they didn't do background checks because they wanted him.
Got it.
When he retired, he was the vice president of procurement for Apple in Silicon Valley, having been hired away from the company 6 times. But he had to take a very low-level position that he was overqualified for, but then his talent and his drive got him to the very top.
So, again, this is just an area that just fascinates me because, you know, you watch TV, you know, obviously you're probably familiar with the movie Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yeah.
Love the movie. How much do you deal with, if you remember the scene when the older gentleman is released
Yeah.
and ultimately kills himself because he just can't deal with society, how much do you deal with these individuals that are coming out and, like you said, nobody has been kind to them and they're just struggling being outside? Do you see that?
We do. Um, we have a meeting on Thursday nights in the inner city of Cleveland, and it's a reentry program for people who've come home from prison who are going through the struggles of trying to reintegrate into a world they don't understand. It's harder for the guys who are older. Most of those folks have no technological skills. They've never been on a smartphone. They've never touched a computer before. And this world moves very fast. And those guys have a hard time adjusting. So we have a meeting every week, and we kind of organize the groups around the length of time guys have served and their age. So they're around like-minded people who are going through types of struggles. And our group leaders are ex-offenders who've also successfully reentered, who can come alongside and explain this first 6 months is going to be tough. You have to think through every situation, give yourself some slack, and then call me. So, and all of our facilitators are on their phone with the guys every week. But we see that quite a bit, where people get overwhelmed by society and think it's easier to go back.
Wow.
But that only lasts for about 90 days. Once you
really?
get past the 90-day window, guys will start to decompress and they'll start feeling like, okay, I can belong out here. I can make this work. But the first 90 days is critical.
So we talked a little bit about what employers should consider. What do you tend to hear from employers as you introduce yourself and the possibilities of true freedom to them? What do you hear from them?
There's always certain classifications of felonies that employers don't want to consider.
Mm-hmm.
They usually are very open to somebody who's had a drug abuse charge or some type of non-violent offense. But the first thing I usually hear is, I don't want anybody who's had a crime of violence, any crime against a child. I just want these lower level offenders. I certainly understand that.
Yeah.
And there are more significant risks to people with higher degree felonies. But as you and I have talked in the past, it's very counterintuitive.
Yeah. I love this. By the way, I'm glad that you're going there because this was a moment for me. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. It's the rate by which people go back to prison is called recidivism, and they measure it in 3-year increments. So the national average is 70%. 3 years post-release, 70% of people who got out of prison go back.
70%.
Go back. It's a very large number, except for people who've been convicted of murder. The recidivism rate nationally is 3%.
Wow.
And it's not for another crime of murder. It's usually for some type of technical violation. Mm-hmm. They had a hard time readjusting, like we talked about earlier. So statistically, and from our experience, the absolute best people to hire is somebody who has a murder conviction.
Wow.
They don't go back to prison. They're the best behaved people in the system. And when they come out, they always are very loyal to their employer, and they never have any trouble. And we certainly won't mention any names. We placed several guys with murder convictions at some of the different companies that you and I have worked with, and those guys have been very good producers.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a hard sell to an HR person to hear that.
Yeah. Listen, it took me a while to process that. So, so murderers, you would say, is the top for employers to say no, but from a statistical standpoint, they're the safest. Okay. Yes. Tell me about who would be next.
Then the next level down will be also one first-time offenses for somebody that had a crime of passion, whatever it happened to be, whether it was an assault case because a guy got into a fight in a bar. And that's why when you and I have talked about background checks, you have to be very specific about what happened.
Yes.
As I said before, I would much rather take a guy with a one-time assault case than a guy who has 9 drug convictions.
Got it.
Because that pattern of behavior shows he's going to relapse, and if he does, he'll steal from you. So crimes of passion, and I love looking at one-time convictions, guys who did something terrible, and there's no excuse for what they've done, but they've learned from it, and then they've maintained a stable, crime-free life for a substantial period of time.
Got it. And then what about people that have been involved in, selling drugs, trafficking, perhaps even consuming it?
Yeah,
What's the data on that?
yeah. People who are, and it seems crazy too. A lot of drug dealers do not use drugs,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
and those guys also, if they can get a job, don't reoffend. They have, and I've had lots. I deal with this population quite a bit. Is I always tell guys, believe it or not, you have a lot of real world business experience,
Yeah.
open air pharmaceutical experience, but
I would like to see that on a resume, by the way. Yeah, yeah.
but you've had to do shipping and receiving. You've had to do workforce management because you had people working for you.
Yep.
You've had to do some logistics. So
Yeah.
you have some skill set that can transfer to a legitimate job.
Yep.
If you learn, if you give yourself a chance not to become impatient and try to make too much money. The problem with guys who've been drug dealers who were successful is they made a lot of money.
Yeah, it's the money.
It's a hard thing. And so, and I've had this conversation with the guys where I had a guy who was a roofer. Now, do you want to be on a roof in August making $12 an hour? And he said, I can make $1,000 tonight. And that temptation to go back to do what's easy is there. So those are the guys they have. A lot of guys who are successful at it are bright, they have skill, but they tend to be impatient.
So, what do you do to then overcome those employers that say to you, "I can't hire a murderer, Michael. I just can't." Of course, I'm sure that at some point you obviously say agreed. I mean, it's you ultimately have the last word, but what do you tell them outside of what you just described for me? Is there anything else that you were able to do?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that I hire them. I have 2 guys who work on our staff who have convictions of murder, who are my best guys. Trustworthy, reliable, hardworking, diligent, and they have a changed heart, a changed life. Because if you go back to the underlying reason for most murders, it's a crime of passion with circumstances that are so bizarre they would never reoccur. So these are people who are pathological criminals. They've just done something very terrible under very extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
So I'll say to the employer, I understand your reservation. I've hired them. I can give you testimonials from dozens of companies who've also hired them who will tell you it's their best guy.
So once you place these individuals, can you share a little bit of what you are able to do and how you work with the employers and the individuals being placed throughout their employment?
Yeah, we do conditional terms of employment. We've done it with Millennia, where part of their condition of continued employment is they have to have weekly contact with us in our meetings so that we're able to see how well they're progressing, especially for people who have a drug history. I love to be able to make sure that I'm looking at this person in the eye every week and they're clean and sober. And one of the things we tell our folks that we work with is if you start going off the track, I'll call your job. Because when we make a referral and we co-sign for you, how you perform is a reflection on us.
Yeah.
And I've done that. And I have done that. I've done it with you guys.
Yep.
So I like telling the HR guy or lady who's working, make it a condition that they have to be at a meeting once a week with us for 1 year on the job.
Yeah.
And after 1 year, you can choose to put whatever conditions you want. But at 1 year, we do urine testing. Certainly employers are welcome to do that. But I love having weekly contact, and that's an extra level of accountability that most companies can't offer.
Correct. So in looking at True Freedom Ministries, I realized that you also have a podcast.
We do.
Yeah. Tell me about Moments in the Word.
Yeah, and that started as a response to this COVID crisis. Because the prison system was locked down, we weren't able to go in. And the chaplains who work at those facilities weren't able to keep up with the religious services. So we proposed, I said, well, if we send you weekly video cast messages, would that be helpful? And they said yes. So we started doing weekly 3-minute messages that has study guides we send into the prisons, and then those loop in the prison system continuously. So we've been doing them now for almost 2 months. And what we surprisingly is that there's been very popular on this side of the fence.
Oh, really?
then we created them for the prison system. They started putting them on Facebook, put them on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and on Facebook, we're getting thousands of hits on them, which is
Really?
surprising. So here's what I've learned, Gustavo. As a public speaker, I can keep someone's attention for 3 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, even when I look at the statistics of this show and what people are watching, we all have some type of ADD. We just don't like to watch for long periods of time. So, it's one of those things that, so be it. If you want to watch 3 minutes, watch 3 minutes. That's fine. But I saw that and I found it interesting. So obviously we're still in this coronavirus lockdown. What are you hoping to see as we get out of it? What would be beneficial to the organization, but more importantly, these individuals that you assist?
For us, I'd love to see a rapid recovery, a very steep V coming out of this.
Yeah.
So that, for instance, I'd love to see the rumble room back to full staff immediately.
Yeah.
Because the more people go back to work, the more opportunities are for the folks that I work with. They're not competing with higher level people.
Mm-hmm.
So a good economy is the best thing that can take place for our folks.
Yeah.
Prior to the coronavirus, when there was like almost a zero unemployment rate, our guys were getting a look by companies for jobs that would never have been considered 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
It finally get to a point where an employer really didn't care what you did; they could care what you could do.
Correct. Now, obviously, True Freedom Ministries is religious based. Do you work with organizations that are not religious, right? Employers?
Yeah, we do. In fact, that's why we formed True Freedom Enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sister organization. It's a separate 501c3, separate board of directors, and it's specifically faith neutral. And it's tasked with workforce empowerment. So we do the pre-release education, the post-release job placement, the workforce transportation program. It's 100% faith neutral. So anybody who qualifies for our program, who are prisoners, whether they're Muslims, Catholics, Protestants, atheists, as long as they meet the criteria, they're able to enter the program. And as far as employers go, as long as an employer is interested in somebody who wants a second chance, who will work hard, it doesn't matter what their background is, we're able to partner with them. So we've had no difficulty working with the offenders on one side or the employers on the other because of our sister organization.
Well, I would tell you in closing, I certainly I'm lucky that I have someone like Michael so close here in Cleveland that I've been introduced to and I've been able to work with. You are top notch, absolutely a professional. You've been absolutely great throughout the entire 2 years that I've worked with Millennia and with you. I just hope that employers out there, particularly those HR peers, get lucky to find their Michael in their states or their cities. It's a population that can be productive. I certainly understand as the employer, as I told you from the get-go, I said, and I even told this to Frank, and he completely understood. I said, my job is to protect the company, find the best people possible, but I also have a responsibility as the head of HR to limit any exposure and liability. And these partners, these organizations like True Freedom understand that. It's a matter of figuring out what the best match is. And luckily, we have a great match with True Freedom, and I certainly hope that others out there do find it. So, Michael, I want to go ahead and close, but as I always do, at the end is your opportunity to tell us anything that you didn't cover, anything that you're working on, and more importantly, anything that you want people to know about either you, True Freedoms, or anything in general.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. Having other HR managers be able to consider our population is essential.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult hurdle to get past for a lot of people because risk is something that's always going to be for an HR manager right in your face. But the partnership we've established and the employees we've been able to place is a track record that we can go by. Your audience should know that I am an ex-offender. I spent 17 years in prison myself. So I understand the challenges our folks are going through. As an employer, I know the difficulties of hiring, making those decisions as well. So this is not something that's theoretical for me. It's something I've lived and continue to live. So I'm grateful for your partnership and your friendship and look forward to working with you as soon as this coronavirus shutdown is over.
One question. How do you keep, being an ex-offender yourself, right? And certainly now you have found your path. How do you keep your sanity? Because we as HR folks, we deal with day-to-day employee issues, right? You name it. But you're dealing with individuals that have real difficulties. How do you keep your sanity?
I try to keep things very siloed. Early on, when we first started doing the addiction recovery program, we've lost people from heroin overdoses. And, you invest in people, you work with them weekly, daily, and then they die, and it's heartbreaking. And I was doing a funeral for one of the guys who overdosed in our program in the inner city of Cleveland. And I was walking into the church building, and one of the pastors who volunteer with us looked at me and says, "I've never seen you not smile before." And I said, "Well, today's a hard day."
Yeah.
He said, "But just think of how many more funerals there would have been if you guys weren't here." He says, "Count the live ones, don't count the dead ones."
Wow.
So, focusing on the victories is essential, because our guys, when they do screw up, it's usually bad.
Yeah.
We've had so many over the years, and it's always that one or two a month. They come out, they're grateful, they do well, they keep us going. And then for me, it's having a very firm foundation in my faith. Knowing that ultimately God's in control. I can give somebody the opportunity, whether or not they succeed or fail or burn me in the process. I have to just hand that to God and go to the next one.
Awesome. Michael, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate our partnership and the relationship we have built. I certainly remain a fan, and I will continue to work not only with you, but any other organization that it's put in front of us. I appreciate your time very much, and I certainly look forward to the next time that we reconnect.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it too.
All right. Have a good night, Michael. Take care.
Good night.
All righty.